So, first of all, hello and welcome, Hans Bunes, to Gesells of Scandinavia. So happy to have you here, Hans.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Cool. So, Hans, before we give the formal presentation, I co-founded a company some years ago called Vendemore, and the company reached product market fit, but then you came in and you helped scale the company and you open up for a more structured way to go international and to grow bigger accounts. So thank you for that. And now for the formal intro, you have worked for over 25 years helping companies grow, accumulating a vast, broad and deep knowledge, case after case, leadership team after leadership team, across different industries. You've also, we must say that because startups, scale-ups, and bigger companies is this continue that the company hopefully walks through or progresses through. So you have been working from seed to early scale up, later scale up, and also to Fortune 500 companies. So it's really nice to pick your brain, and we'll do our best to pick your brain for the benefit of our members to help them get some tangible takeaways, and I'm sure there will be several. And I want to point out that you have a knack of creating very nice one-liners. But before we continue, who is the individual Hans, and is there something nobody knows about you?
Well, so the individual Hans is much like the professional individual. I think in this particular case, I think you captured very nicely. I've gone from, big companies to small companies, many countries, many places, done a lot of different things. I was on a podcast with OneFlow a while back, and we called it my career slipping on the banana peel, because I've done so many different things. And a lot of times it's like opportunities arise and they take in there. And that's kind of been my thing, is that Vendemore, when you and I met, was an opportunity. I mean, I was at the right place at the right time, and we ended up working together in that sense. So I think that's more kind of me, is some people plan their stuff well, long in advance. I'm more the opportunity arises, and I want to work with this, and I want to work with these people, because I think that's the other part of the thing is, there's certain type of people you want to work with in that sense, right?
But also, Hans, like you're slipping on a lot of banana peels when it comes to marketing and growth. That seems to be your banana peel throughout your career.
Yeah, and maybe it's the mentality of taking and seizing opportunities as they come along. I think it might be the other way of looking at it as well.
Yeah,
and I think
the
other thing I think I do really well is I maintain my professional network and my professional relationships I speak to people at very high positions in very big companies, and I speak to people in high positions in not as big companies, because we have a joint trust between each other, where every conversation is an open conversation where both parties learn something new in there, which is also kind of there. And then in terms of a fact, I once upon a time was an aspiring musician. At the age, it was either 13 or 14. It was 1985, 1986. I can't remember exactly when. My bandmates and I, we recorded in one of the most advanced studios in Norway at the time, a single that was released. Never, honestly, it wasn't, it never sold the 1,000 copies we printed. But at least it is documented and it exists.
Yeah, you went for it. I mean, that's
At that age, yes.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so back to like what our members like. I'm now like I'm trying to advocate for our members, and if you're a CEO or if you're a founder in a scale up, like 1,000 things are happening at once, and when you enter the scale up phase, you think now, wow, things are going to get easier and they get more difficult, and you get bigger problems also, but also bigger horizons. So what is this thing that we are going to talk about today, and how can it help? Because we have chosen this thing that you have talked, and you're extensively coming back to this thing, the ICP, the ideal customer, idealkunden of Swedish. I don't know how you say it in Norwegian.
No,
but
it'd be the same. It'd be the same. Yeah.
A bit the same. So why is it? What is it? How can you use it? And what are the results? And what is it? And why is it important? So if we start there.
Let's start with that. So just a little bit of context settings.
Sure.
To the notion of the ideal customer profile, and look at the work that we do, my business partner, Susanna Ferenczi, and I, we predominantly work with kind of B2B technology companies that sell something reasonably complex to mid-sized companies and to enterprises in this particular case. So when I talk about a lot of the examples, they will come from that context. But that doesn't mean it doesn't apply to everyone else in this particular case, right? And when I look at some of our kind of growth stage companies that we've worked with, we work from seed all the way up to Fortune 500. One of the things that's very clear, the same rules apply to everyone. And I think there's two rules you need to think about in this particular case, is that your market, regardless of who you are and what you think, is finite. Your resources to business development that market is finite, right? So if you are a CEO and a leader of a growth company, you need to keep that in mind, that I have finite resources. I have a runway of cash, maybe from VC funding or whatever else it is, and I have a finite market to go after, okay? And I need to find the right level of new logo acquisition. We predominantly work on finding new customers with our new logos with our clients, and I need to keep the ones that I have, okay? For us, what we hope at a growth stage of someone like in your membership is that they're still loving the problem that they originally wanted to solve as much as they're loving their product that they have, right?
Yeah.
So for us, the ideal customer profile is that perfect marriage where your value creation, what you so uniquely do, matches that problem space that customer has. That's the ideal customer to us. It's not about it's 550 employees, 5 million euros of revenue in this industry and so forth. No, it's about that description of that problem space that you once upon a time built your business to solve for. So
I think that's very interesting because we will probably get into that. But this triggers me because in this haystack of information, there is gold when you hit that kind of nerve that you're describing, but it's very difficult. So, okay, I'll get out of the way.
No, so that's okay. So we simplify that. Ideal customer profile, the marriage of the problem space of your customer and your ability, the solution space to solve that in the best possible way, right? And then ultimately, I think the second rule is you got to make money doing that, right? Is that you can actually profitably do that. And then maybe kind of the altruistic is that you can do that without harming anyone else, the environment and so forth, and doing that, or other people. So that's kind of the marriage. The problem and the solution, marriage, and I can make money doing it.
So that is very interesting because like if you have this, I mean, as you're talking, I'm recalling so many discussions in leadership teams that I have been part of. And it seems very easy when you say, yeah, but we know the problem space, we know what it is, and we have this other side, we have this product and they find this contact and energy just flows and we get cash flow and so on. But why is it that so many, like in the first stage of the company, you don't even know if you have is there even cash flow? Is there even product market fit? And then you come into this thing, okay, you actually have something here and cash starts to come. How can you as a management team arrive at that ideal customer profile? What's the journey towards that? Because it's difficult.
We always start our processes with our clients of using some degree of collective intelligence, okay? And the collective intelligence approach is, and we got some canvases and stuff that can help to kind of facilitate that, and I'm happy to share some of that with the audience later on. But you'd be amazed if you put people who sell, people who deliver, people who support, you put them in a room and you ask them two things. As salespeople, you ask them, take me through the conditions when you feel and you could sense that this deal is accelerating exactly as I thought it would. That customer I'm hitting all of the points and all of that. And give me an example of when that's not happening. And as you start kind of almost like post-it note doing all of that stuff, you're going to see some really interesting patterns. You do that a couple of times with couple of different people, you're going to see a context of that ideal customer very, very clearly. And then you ask the people to deliver it is to say, so on the path to value, now your salespeople have sold. Now your role is to deploy this and create some degree of give the path to value. What are the stumbling blocks until the customer says, now the value is being consumed? Okay, and show us all these. And that collective, I can tell you that of all of the companies that we work with, from seed level to Fortune 500, we've done this, that power of that collective intelligence is very interesting. I would say that 75 to 80% what we do is to facilitate getting that knowledge collectively down from the people that work in the organization into a structured way. Okay. And if you sell technology, it's typically comes down to four things. It comes down to whether or not your ideal customer has the organizational maturity to consume what you have. Do they have the technology maturity to do it? Do they have the operational complexity in there? And is there anything out there externally, like regulatory environment and so forth, that you need to cater to all these? Every map that I've seen, we end up in some degree of a flavor around those four areas, typically in there. But 75 to 80% of it's done that. And you talked about seed level, you talked about scale ups, but I can tell you one thing. We work with a household name Fortune 500 client that anyone of your audience would recognize. Okay.
Yeah, everybody would know the name if we.
Everyone would know if we said it. Okay. And we worked with them in one of the large European countries to create the ideal customer profile for one of their most known solution area. Okay. And now it was in mid-market organizations because they had the enterprise market covered pretty well. So it was mid-market. And we do this collective intelligence with the salespeople, the delivery people, and we read through all in this case, to be honest, is my colleague Susanna, who does most of this work. She reads through some of the customer testimonials and all these other things. As a marketer, Niklas, you can imagine what happens in this. Now we're talking about how do we now business develop this, go after these accounts afterwards. Now, as a marketer, you have been told for a very long time that the value proposition is focused around, we are going to save you money by deploying this. But actually, what the ideal customer says is, help me to grow my business, enable my growth by deploying that solution, right? And so they spend millions and millions of euros over the years to communicate cost savings, when in reality, we did this collective intelligence exercise with them, household Fortune 500 company, their narrative is wrong. Their positioning is wrong because they haven't taken the time to really understand this. So start with that collective wisdom. Okay. And for the audience and for the members, I have a couple of simple templates you guys could use yourself that would help you to steer that. But it's incredibly powerful to start with all the knowledge you have.
Yeah. I mean, a couple of reflections on that topic. First off, I think it's very nice for all our small scale-up members to hear this. I mean, you often think the big guys are perfect, and they're not, and that's really takes some burden off of where you are. And the other thing is, why is it that we never bring the collective intelligence we're gonna have, in an organization, to bear in these conversations? Because it's what you're describing is basically, yes, you have the soft data basically gathered by the salespeople throughout the years of trying to sell the solution, and highly smart people that see this. And then you have the delivery function who actually know, is this a good customer, that in the sense that we can serve the customer in a good way and make good money off that? Why is it that companies don't do this? I
think we get too focused on and I'm a quantitative guy, right?
Yeah.
I'm an Excel guy. I drilled on it, but we start from that exercise. So what we typically do is we say, okay, we have 100 install base customers. What does the look like for those 100? Without asking ourselves, would we sell to all those 100 today? And the reality is unlikely you wouldn't, even as a scale up, right? There's some of them you sold to early that no longer fits their profile. I haven't yet to meet a project from scale ups, not so much in seed because it's very different then, but from scale up to Fortune 500, where 25 to 35% of what you think is your ideal customer profile from a target account list perspective, all these other things, actually does not fit it. Okay. Yeah. We have sat with the same Fortune 500 company, and we rejected 25% of their current customers from the ideal customer in agreement with the sales leadership. They realized that they had sold, and that the likelihood was that at some point in time, these customers would churn because the match wasn't there.
Yeah. Hans, there's so much pain in this. I mean, I have been in so many startups and scale-ups, and I have been selling and delivering to these people. And I just, when you tell this story, it's just like you have these customers that love you and you love them back. Like it's just harmony. And then you have those who you squeezed, like the deal. You have squeezed the deal, and it's horrible. It's horrible for them, and they don't like you, and you feel like, no, we are such a bad company. And then you walk into the other meeting, like the next meeting, and they love you. So this seems I mean, this kind of bears down to the results if we want to go already to the results. But do you want to say anything more about your process in like?
I think the biggest thing is to try to find a way to be as unbiased as possible in this exercise, right?
Yes.
So find a way, and that's typically what we're very good at, is that we brought in to facilitate more than anything else and to remove the bias from it, right? Salespeople survive to a high degree on being optimistically biased, right?
Yeah. Yeah, to survive, yeah.
You have to survive, right? Understandably, because they're compensated and they know there's other things on that. Even though I would argue the best salespeople that I work with are ruthless in terms of qualification and would like to qualify out. I think the other thing I'd like to, for the audience to think about it, and going back to this, it's almost, I would say, as important to understand who not to go after as it is to understand who to go after.
Yeah,
and as
very
I said,
valid, yeah.
25 to 35%. We've used machine learning models with our friends at Dun & Bradstreet for some of this. We've used kind of triaging current, and it's never, I've yet to be in a situation where 25 to 35% of what you have today in your database is bad.
Yeah,
bad.
Yeah.
Bad. And identifying that bad. Now, the difference between, let's say, the Fortune 500 space, I would say, and the kind of the growth space, because we were working with a US-based growth company that we were very, very in-depth with them and understood their business really, really on a really deep level, was that in their business, same thing. We ended up triaging. It was 32% of the list that sales had nominated was put, but we didn't bin it in this particular case. Because in this particular case, I think what's important is that they don't fit the criteria right now. That doesn't mean in a year from now they don't fit the criteria. So we put them in the parking lot to re-qualify them later on, or in a year.
Yeah.
To do that. We didn't throw them away. We put them in it and say, has the context changed for them or us in a year? And then let's see it to do that. So that would be the other thing, is you need to structure. You need to understand the cadence and the structure and the cadence and of governance. I'm sorry. How do I manage this? What are the changes in the market, in the customer base, or for my product space that would change that ideal customer?
This is so interesting. I mean, a couple of things. One is what you're describing. I mean, you're talking tens of percent. Basically, I mean, the header of this event at Gesells of Scandinavia is like 30% is wrong, kind of. Of course, it's a bit clickbaity, but I mean, these are big numbers. So for me as a scale-up leader, if I can free up resources being consumed by the wrong 30%, that's a huge win.
Well, but I'll even give you one more concrete example, and this is actually another Fortune 500 company that we work with. You would think that they are so sophisticated and so great, and they got all the models and all these other things. So their way of doing it. So let's say, and these guys are typically based upon coverage models. So how many accounts, my sales force is this big, this many people. With that sales force, how many accounts can I cover in a country, right? And you now have to think, Niklas, in the terms of mature categories, mature markets, all these other things, right? So it's more about renewal, some cross-selling, and then eating someone else's lunch, essentially, right? Taking out someone else, right? So you look at this from a coverage perspective, and the way that they would go from a sales ops and a sales planning perspective is like, they'll just push the account that they had in the past back into the planning process without asking themselves some critical questions. And we modeled this with them. So the first thing that happened was when we were working with, in this case, it's, kind of a classical Dun & Bradstreet type of organization that buys a lot of their stuff, right? So we're working with them. So the first thing we realized that was, so let's, for math, to make the math easy, let's say it's 2,000 accounts, okay?
Yeah.
So the first thing that we realized that was 10% of them were non-viable anymore. Non-viable in the sense there's M&A activities, there could be name changes, it could be liquidations, it could be all kind of stuff, right? So first, assigning 1 out of 10 is no one who doesn't really exist anymore. And then we realized, as we'd modeled, in this case, we were pretty advanced modeling, right? We had a machine learning model that we'd worked with D&B, and we came to the conclusion that, so we looked at distribution of the remaining, and we looked at it, and we looked at the entire country in this particular case, and we said, okay, the model says that 50% and below 50% and below is questionable at best, right? In this case, it wasn't 30%, it was 50%.
Wow. Yeah.
And then I looked at the distribution of what salespeople we're going to have, okay, the remaining part. And I realized that 30% of what's being assigned to the salespeople that they are going to get paid on
Yeah.
was sitting in that bottom 50%, which means that 10% of what they're going to go doesn't exist. 30% is statistically so unlikely to ever buy, leaving them, but from an efficiency. So we have to look at this from an efficiency and an effective set. So the effectiveness
Yeah.
is it's quota attainment, revenue growth, all these other bits. But from an efficiency, we now set up these salespeople who are being asked to prospect on their own with 4 out of 10 calls being completely useless.
That's pretty scary numbers.
Yeah. And this is sophisticated businesses.
Well, I mean, it's horrible. It's horrible numbers. But on the other flip side of the coin is huge potential, right? So
yes,
if you can, I mean, you probably were among some in the room, you were this unpopular guy who came with the unpopular truth, but who, with the guy responsible for the numbers, you probably were a hero that could actually deliver an upside and leverage.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, I think when it comes to this kind of work that you are describing, if we zoom back like to the starting point when you have some kind of traction going from a newly started company. I know there are a lot of companies who don't identify as startup because like in the Nordics, a lot of startup, that's tech companies. But you have started a newly small company and it starts to show some traction, right? At that point, a lot is in the head of the founder and also a lot of the magic. So when the founder comes into the room, there is some aura of like magic, and the founder obviously gets a lot of things sold, has a lot of clout also with delivery in the organizations. I've been in a lot of organizations where the founder just overrides all delivery all the time because he has sold this. So now delivery needs to do. Of course, this is not good for scaling. But what I want to end up with as a point is that isn't this thing that the founder knows all this, isn't this a typical good entry point for an ICP work? Because when the founder feels like, okay, it starts to sell, I cannot really do all this by myself. Isn't this one of the critical moments to bring in you as a coach, or at least that people use your templates and have this session, bring in the other 2-3 salespeople that probably are there and a bit of delivery to get off kind of chiropractice to get better and more known in the organization so that scaling can happen for the next one and a half years.
I think it is. And I think it's very interesting. We were working with a seed-level organization in a SaaS, selling something very complex, very kind of change management like type of stuff, right?
Yeah.
So long sales cycle, all these other things. And there it's about what's the next 10 customers. And once we pursue those, what are the next maybe 100 that's going, that has that. So you chunk it down. I think the worry that you get in early stage is you look at all the massive potential, right?
Yeah.
When exactly what you should be doing is, so what does the profile look for like the next 10 customers? And I'll give you a perfect example of how important it is to have a governance around this, because this is a perfect example of this organization. So this organization was in kind of an employee engagement software, especially targeting themselves for, call it classical organizations that would have a lot of manual tasks, high churn, high employee dissatisfaction, mundane tasks, all these other bits and pieces. How do we create more engagement with this type of an organization? And early stage got a couple of quick early wins. But one of the problems was that it was such a heavy lifting on their part to deploy it, that in order for them to successfully do something profitably with these customers, they needed 1,000 users per instance, employees actually, to be using the platform in order to make this make any sense, right? So they decided to invest in self-provisioning tools. So HR and all these others could do it, so they didn't have to be involved. And they got it down to where it makes sense for them at 100 users, right? All of a sudden you can do profitable. Now, it's probably understood that, yes, the 1,000 users is better from a revenue perspective and an AR perspective, but the velocity is bad, right? Right. Yeah. So you might be better off getting 500 or 600 user organizations, in the same time it takes you and the effort to get you 1,000. So that's when the context changed, what that ideal customer looked like, because you may want to build into your model as well the problem space, yes, all these other things, but also how quickly can I what's my velocity, right? In terms
Yeah.
of how quickly can I acquire these customers, get them onboarded, get them ready to go without it being such a heavy lifting on ourselves, right? And that was the founder who led the sales, right?
Yeah.
And he was trying to bring in more people, but in order to do that, they needed to be able to prove that, and then they could bring it to the next level.
Yeah, it's so interesting when we speak about this, because like a lot of the problems that you describe come from, this is not my problem, it's their problem downstream. So what you actually bring, you bring the whole value chain into the room, and then you say, okay, for this to work, this needs to happen in sales. Then, but sales need to sell something that works for delivery, and delivery needs to have a product that actually is good to delivers a high value. So this discussion, I think this is like one of the key things to grow a company, actually, because also what use is it if you're at that stage with your scale up where it's only the founder or it's only the management team that kind of have this understanding, like consciously or subconsciously have this understanding of how to sell something that's profitable. If not, the whole organization can do that. I mean, then you will market wrong, and you will sell wrong, and you will, when you onboard a salesperson, you will not be able to make the salesperson understand, to see the signals that you're describing. If nobody can teach the new sales guy what to look for, then they need to learn it all by themselves, and that will take a year. Like then you have a person who is not profitable for a year. And just scale up.
Yeah. And I think that kind of so there's two parts of it: path to success for your salespeople and your marketing people having a very clear. This is our audience. This is who we're going to engage, and our role is to do that. And then I think it's also from a delivery. What's the path to value for the customer? I just want to divulge on one more thing, which is very interesting. One of our kind of other clients in the growth space, a very complex solution. You're looking at couple of $100,000 starting point for their transaction with their customers. And the original problem statement when I was brought in and we were working with them was around deal velocity. They felt that their deal velocity was too slow. They couldn't understand why it was taking so long. And we did exactly what I described. We worked with them, collected, I interviewed salespeople, VP level, delivery people, everyone in there. Very, very mature organization in terms of like, people have been around for a long time. They really, really understood the market in many, many ways. It was a fabulous client to work with. But as we had gone through our analysis, we realized that they did not have a velocity problem. Because actually, if you looked at the closed won deals, either for expansion or net new, right, they were in the range we would expect, 285 to 225 days, all these other things. What they had was a massive bucket that had been sitting 350 days in Salesforce, and then finally getting qualified out. And then we went back and we looked at every one of those qualified opportunities. Again, keep in mind, growth stage company, right? So there's enough data in here to be there. We realized that 75% of those qualified out opportunities were down to 4 reasons. They're all related to attributes that should be associated with their ideal customer profile. Okay.
Wow.
And now keep in mind, from a resource perspective, they have deployed technical pre-sales resources. They've gotten to stage number 4 out of 6 in a sales process by the time this happened. They've invested heavily in this. And the reason why everyone went out, there were 4. 75% of this was 4, and they should have never pursued them because they hadn't qualified them in the beginning. So very expensive resources, very expensive process, all these other things to that stage. They did not have a velocity problem, a qualify in, qualify out problem, which is what we ended up working with.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, this kind of brings us, we talked about results, but you can immediately see, like, in all your examples and your experience, there is a huge efficiency problem, which is basically wasting resources on the wrong stuff. And we kind of feel that it's tens of percent in the company. And then we have the upside, which is actually directing, talking in the right way to the right people and closing business with them. So there is like the upside, the effectiveness thing happening. I think like what is really helpful and hopeful in what you're describing is you have a method that already, like, we're also gonna, like, this is not a cliffhanger, but a reveal. You have brought a gift for our members, and I think that's really nice one, where you are sharing some of your templates, like what you can do, just bringing the sales team together. And we leave that inside the community for our members. And also we should point out that you are available. So if someone wants to talk to you shortly, maybe bring you into a workshop with the management team, of course you're in the community. And I mean, it's not, we cannot pick your brain for hours, but you're here.
Yeah, and I want to be very, very clear with this, Niklas, to this community is
Yeah.
that my business partner and I, we work in the following way. Our biggest goal is to make ourselves redundant. And by making ourselves redundant means that the organization that we have been working with, we have transferred everything, what we know, all our methodology, all these other things to them. And hopefully they are as passionate and think about this in the same way that we think about it and are there to run on ourselves. We are not there to sit through an ICP exercise ahead of annual planning for every one of our clients the rest of their lives. No,
Yeah.
we are there to enable you as a team to do that. Yes, we may have to pay us a little bit in order to get there, but that's our business. We are so passionate about this that the biggest success we're going to have is that more people think and act the way we do.
Yeah. And I just want to point out, like, circling back to the fact that we have actually, our paths have crossed before, and I know that you're a very warm guy to work with, and you're also a person who loves the topic, exactly as you say. You're very passionate about this, and I think your results speak for themselves. So I encourage our members, of course, to reach out to you, because, like, as said, let's have that as the end note. I think talking to the right customer is 10%, tens of percents, 10, 20, 30 of money saved, and 10, 20, 30 of money gained, basically. This is a lever that I recommend every scale up to nail, because it's, and I shouldn't word this too much, but I've been in so many situations where I personally have failed and my team have failed in figuring this out. And every time you get on the right path and you nail your ICP, you're just cursing yourself and saying, like, why did we do this last year? Thank you, Hans, so much. Hans Bunes Frenchie. We'll have all the details underneath this post, and we'll include your templates, and you will be contactable within the community Gazelles of Scandinavia. Thank you, Hans.
Thank you, Alex.